Robert Shed Locks, Sunday, 26th of April, 2020. Hello, I'm Robert, and welcome to my shed. Please excuse the shirt sleeves, it's a bit warm today. But I want to talk about something called a saddle joint, which is a really cool joint that I saw recently. It's a bit niche, but I think it's one that deserves more attention. However, this week I've been playing around mostly with the vise. Frankly, I've been pottering. I've got the vise support. I got the vise quick release tightened up. I turned it around an extra half a turn. That's made it work a lot better. The thing still needs greasing, so it's not quite perfect. And there's also a bit of corrosion. One bits of metal snapped inside. The bit that covers the bit that holds on the bit that covers the screw, started getting dust on it. Is now resting on that screw when it shouldn't be. I need to talk to someone who knows about metalwork to fix that. I cut this vice cheek to size. I cut another vice cheek. But I cut another vice cheek to size, realised that was wrong, and then cut another one. So the other vice cheek is this one, which I cut with the miter saw. And that will sit here. Full height of the vice cheek plus the bench top. Not moving in and out and abut both of these. These have to be flush, which I think they will be. And I've also cut 3 dog holes in the top, blind dog holes, so just with the 3/4 inch drill bit, which is this thing. So I have little taper bits at the bottom of the guide hole. And these will work for dogs. It's going to be like with a dog in here and a dog in here. It's just it to the right width and then trap the piece of work between them so it's held on the sides so I can then plane on the top or whatever I need to do. Also picked up screws. So I have these PZ1 head screws. I don't like PZ1s, and I've got these PZ2s. I do like PZ2s. These strip a lot less easily. And just to show you the difference in size. Yeah. These PZ1s are a bit like the old Phillips head screw, except the diagonals are a bit smaller. They're supposed to strip less readily, but they don't, in my experience. If you get it stuck, it will strip. Whereas PZ2s are a lot sturdier. That's my tip for the day. So these shorter stubby ones will go into the existing cast screw holes on the vice jaw, through the vice jaw and into the vice cheek. I'll show you on this one because it's easier to see on camera. They're the same width. And that will go most of the way through. And 2 of those will hold the vice cheek on quite nicely. These will need countersink holes drilled in. They'll go through the dead cheek, which is this one, through the dead cheek, through the dead jaw, which is this jaw at the back here that you probably can't see. I'm holding this piece of wood at the moment, and then the rest of it will go into the vice support piece of wood that the vice itself is bolted onto. So that should hold these jaws quite nicely. The only metalwork I'm using on the tie bench is to hold this vice on and hold things onto the vice. It's a metal vice, so that makes sense. The only glue on the bench is on this bench top. Now, I'd just like to point out that the vice support here and the one here and the vice jaw here means that under this dog hole is a hole which could fill up with stuff. A cunning plan is to take a pair of long nose pliers and use it to remove this homemade pup, which is now stuck. It really is stuck. There we go. So this is a pellet. It's a little piece of, looks like cork, it's actually balsa. It's the length of dowel. It has a bullet catch or ball catch on the top. It's a ball catch in the UK. It was sold as a bullet catch. It's called a bullet catch in Canada. You know, the ball catch. It's the kind of catch you have on a cupboard door if you want it to stick when it closes but still pull open. Exactly what I want for this. And I've just put a little bit of a chamfer on the back there so you can get it out again, something to grip onto. That will go flush enough into this hole without falling through. Simple as that. So yeah, now I'm really stressed. I barely slept last night, and I think part of the reason for that is this is really stressing me out. If I get this bench top wrong, I'll break something. Because I'm holding this bench up on by 4 floating tenons. If I get it right, it's absolutely solid. If I get it wrong, something will split. So let's take a look at what's here. This is what the underside of my benchtop currently looks like. Lots of masking tape to draw things out on because I don't want to mark this, even though it's already been marked a lot. I tried to draw these up by dead reckoning, that is, measure this and go, this is 98.5 millimeters from the end, so measure 98.5 millimeters from where this line would be, which is where I drew against this. And it sort of almost worked, except these aren't quite parallel. And even though I had it within a millimeter, it was still a millimeter of the wrong thing. So they were all in the wrong place. Just by a few millimeters, but enough to throw the whole thing out. These floating tenons are softwood, which is a little concerning. I think it should be alright, so nothing's going to be moving against it. They're from an old project I did a couple of years ago, making baseboards for my train set, which I still haven't finished. Really should finish that. And these, I just cut them in half, made 4 of them. So what I did in the end was cut little mortises like this, about an 1/8 inch deep. Just enough to be able to put them in reasonably stably. And but on this, on these rails, I then put the top on, drew around them with the only implement that would fit, because it's a really, really tight fit. I couldn't even get a pencil in. The only thing I could get in was a fine line permanent marker. That's why there's weird pink colour. And drew around the tenons, took them out, and then well, first thing I did was I chiseled out these mortises properly. It's now 25mm deep, they're flat, they're smooth, they're solid right angle corners. The tenons fit solidly into them, right into the edge. And I can drag the tenons across. And it's a stiff fit, which it should be. But I can drag them all the way across on both sides. And that means when I knock this down with the hammer, it will go in. I say hammer, I'm actually going to use a mallet. Spacing 6 inches from the end of the bench top, 8 inches from the end of the bench top, 8 inches, 8 inches, 8 inches, 6 inches. That's roughly even. See, ideally I wanted one here, but I was worried it might get in the way of the vice, because this is where the major movement is. So instead I've got one here, one just here. So if anything, the vice causes a big movement, it's going to pull the bench top, and that's going to pull these two primarily. And they've got the long edges in the direction of maximum movement. But I also have these short edges, 4 of them, which gives me at least 4 square inches, 8 square inches both sides, against any movement from the tail vice. which should be plenty really, I would have thought. So that's what I've done there. For these, it was a matter of cutting an 1/8 inch mortise on one of them, laying the bench top back on, measuring up the next one, seeing if that was in the right place, then cutting that one, then putting it back, and then remeasuring, and so on, back and forth. And I think I've done pretty well. These three are all cut in what appears to be the correct position, and this one I had to extend it on this side a little bit, and I've left a line now where I've got to cut a pencil line, and hopefully, fingers crossed, it should all work. It's my first time working in a hardwood with a hammer and chisel. It's going okay so far. Beech is famous for tear out. There's a little bit of tear out just here, which I've more or less covered by covering it in masking tape. The reason for beech tear out is diagonal flecking. This diagonal flecking pattern here, which is caused by radial grain in the wood. I'll probably talk about that next week. But for now, I want to talk about the saddle joint, because I didn't get time last week. To the blackboard. If you want a wooden panelled room like they did in the 18th, 19th centuries, a lot, take a look at this joint. But I reckon it's also useful if you're using green wood, and it looks a bit like this. Take a piece of wood, and cut out the bottom section, almost like you were going to do a bridle joint, except you don't cut it out square. Instead, in the middle, you leave that sort of shape. So, in cross section along here, you would have that. And then the tenon piece has a notch cut out on the bottom. That's a terrible line. Notch cut out on the bottom of it like this. And that notch will fit into that slot. That's all it is. It's just a simple variation in the bridle joint. Just a line. So, yeah, this sits on top of this, and this notch is the only thing holding it into position. Now, obviously, it needs to be a fairly tight fit lengthwise, but that's okay. Wood doesn't tend to shrink along its length. But this way, because of this notch, any seasonal variation is halved. And that means that this piece of wood barely moves compared to this front piece of wood, barely moves compared to this front piece of wood. And in seasonal variation over the year, it stays in position, even without central heating. I think that's pretty neat. I also reckon that if you did that with new wood, the joint would be a lot neater, because the wood would shrink less. It would tend to shrink here and here, so you get more. So instead of pulling in from the edges entirely, you'd end up with less in the middle. That's how I think it works. It's called a saddle joint because it looks like a person sitting on a saddle, sort of, if you use your imagination a bit. Obviously, you see half of this on here, but that may not be in fact, so you can always cut this blind if you want to. Yeah, I just think it's quite neat. The saddle joint. Thank you for tuning in. and next week I will be talking about tail vices, or possibly how to fix the bench if it all goes horribly wrong. I suppose I've got a week to think about it. Well, ta-ta for now. Excuse me one moment, I'm going to step out of frame so I can point at things with a hammer. Not a hammer, it's a mallet. Oh well.